So now, today we're going to talk about the 2 skills you need in order to be successful as a business loan broker. To be assertive and to have a sense of charisma. Perception is key. You have to be confident in the way you speak. I have to get you to like me within a very short period of time. So now, today we're going to talk about the 2 skills you need in order to be successful as a business loan broker. That's right. The 2 skills you need to be successful as a business loan broker. I really don't care how much knowledge you've gained, even if you've gone through my course. This is one of the things that I'm actually going to be creating a separate training on this, because knowledge is just not enough in this day and age. You need to be able to have, I'm gonna go ahead, not gonna wait that long. You need to be able to be assertive and to have a sense of charisma in order for you to be successful. So assertiveness and charisma and professional assertiveness. And we're gonna dive deep into what I mean by all of this just here in just a second, because I have seen people come into my course, okay, and not be successful. And I question, man, what did I do? Is there something I need to do? Is that something I need to change? I've worked with certain people that just don't have, and I hate to have to put it like this, but they don't have the personality to become a successful business loan broker. So we're gonna go over some of the principles just about business. You know, I always say that people do business with people they know and like. Again, let me repeat that. People do business with people they know and like. Just think about it. The people, you know, how whenever you purchase your first car, the sales rep made you like them. You know, your real estate rep, you know, your banker at the local, whatever it is. Even if you go to Best Buy and you're trying to buy a computer, you tend to be more driven, or I don't even know what the right word is, but hopefully you guys are getting the point that I'm trying to make. People do business with people they know and like. That's just what it is. It's always been like that for years, and it will never change. So you have to be likable, okay? You have to be likable. You have to develop a sense of charisma about you. You have to have a certain way of how you represent yourself. I've talked to plenty of people that say, man, I really like your channel, I like your YouTube channel, I like your personality. That is my version of charisma, okay? You know, and I try to deploy, if you want to say that, my personality, my way of thinking, my even the way I dress, the way I represent myself around y'all. Yes, I don't get suited and booted all the time, but this is part of my charisma. This is, you know, my setup. You know, one of the biggest inspirations was Kevin Samuels to me. Shout out to the Godfather. You know, I call myself the Godfather of lending. You know, my setup, my screen, you know, I've thought about all of this on how I want to be perceived. Perception is key. Okay, if you haven't heard that before, you need to hear it now. You know, perception is key, especially how you represent yourself in business. You can be the best of the best, but unless you have the right, unless you're likable, unless you have the right charisma, and also unless you're assertive. We're gonna get into the assertive section in just a second, but let's spend a little more time as far as charisma. The charisma comes from your personality, how you present yourself, how you speak, how you connect with other individuals, how you share your experiences in a way that people can actually get it. You know, receive tons of compliments on my book, 3 Paths to Lending. Download it for free, link in the description. And by the way, look, short break, you know, so we gotta pay some bills. If you don't know, you should know. My name is Brian Sortiano, the Godfather of funding, as I call it. If you need funding, Pantech Consulting Group, I have a great firm. We've been in business for a lot of years, okay, since 2011, helping small business owners like yourself get access to funding. If you're looking to start, grow, or even expand your current businesses, you want to get a link in the description. Schedule a time where we can discuss some of your options. Or if you're looking to get into this industry, okay, link in the description where we can go ahead and train you on how you can go ahead and get started working as an agent or as an agency owner, if you want to own your own agency. Now, if you're just interested in learning a little bit more about the product, there's going to be a short mini course that I have, link in the below, The Wealthy Middleman, where I teach you a little bit about the different products that are available in the marketplace. But anyway, getting back to it. 3 Paths to Lending is a book that I've written, and my objective on that book was to be able to explain briefly and in a way that anybody could understand the 3 ways in how they can get a business funded. Either based on the client's credit, the client's income, and the client's assets. And one of the major compliments I always get is it was so easy to understand the way you communicated, the way you just explained it. It was just easy. I had a client of mine say that I remember buying my first house. This guy was from Africa, and he said, I remember buying my first house, and they were trying to explain to me about this credit score thing that I didn't really understand, but I did not get it until I read your book, okay? So the way you communicate goes a long way. Your tone of voice goes a long way. There's a book that I read that talk about, the way people communicate. It's based on, it's usually about 80 to 90% actions. I think something like that. The part of communication is your actions. Your actions speak a lot. So I think like it's up there, 75, 80, even 80% of how you communicate is based on your actions, and about 10 to 15% is your tone, and the rest of it is actually the words that are coming out of your mouth. So it doesn't really matter how what those words are. How those words are expressed matters way more than even the words. And it gets even crazier when you're talking about phone communication, because majority of the job that we do as a business loan broker is through the phone. So you have to really, your tonality, the choice of words, and as a broker, we're trying to influence the clients to do something to help them reach their goal. I'm trying to get you and influence you to send me your credit report so I can so I can determine exactly what you qualify for. Now, in order for you to do that, I have to build trust. Okay, you gotta see what I'm talking about. You have to be likable. I have to get you to like me within a very short period of time. And I have to instill enough confidence that and think that I know what the heck I'm talking about within our first conversation. It's almost like a date. That's what I always train my students. It's almost like a date. That initial call, there's a video that I created about how to handle that initial call. And you want to watch that video. So if you just do a search on how to handle that initial call, Broker Solutions Academy, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I take into account the lessons and the theories behind the 3 factor lending. In order to handle that call, in addition to that, I infuse a little bit of personality, charisma, for you to get the clients to know you. The more time a client spends with you, the more they'll be able to actually like you. The more you get them to do what you need them to do. That's just how things work. So the objective behind that initial call is to gather the necessary data, and at the end of it is to get them to send you a credit report or bank statement. But in order to do so, you need to get them to speak about themselves. A lot of people love talking about themselves. Asking open-ended questions. Very not just generic open-ended question. We're not sitting here talking about what's your favorite color, what's your favorite food, but open-ended questions that pertains to the topic at hand as it pertains to their business. Tell me about your business. How did you get inspired to get into this? And a few other different things that are relevant as it pertains to what we're talking about. So the one skill you must master, and it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take you working on your personality. It's gonna take you to read certain books. I've read books about communication. I've read, Think and Grow Rich is a powerful book. Tony Robbins has been very inspirational with the way he represents himself. Brian Tracy, Napoleon Hill was just, that's huge. Even with some of the recent stuff with, Kevin Samuels, I mentioned him often on this video. He helped me with finding out how how visually represent myself, okay? A lot of this, I'm gonna say shout out to Kevin Samuels. I changed my wardrobe because of that man. Okay, I told myself I am not gonna be shopping. I got 3 boys. I'm not gonna be shopping in the same stores my boys are shopping at. I'm not gonna wear the same shoes my kids are wearing. Okay, unless I'm going to the gym, I'm not putting on no tennis shoes in my feet. Okay, these were all inspired by Kevin Samuels. I used to watch that man and watch his videos, and I was just amazed about his setup, how he had everything, how the candle of the day, the cologne of the day, and just he was very likable, but also assertive. He was a dick. Okay, so let's go ahead and convert into the assertive part of things. One of the different ways that you're gonna be assertive is your tonality. You cannot be all over here soft-toned trying to be in the business loan industry. You have to be confident in the way you speak, and your tone has to speak and sound confidently, okay? I think about every major president that there is out there. Everyone that is considered to be the great, they were really great as far as communicating to the public. They were great speech writers, or they were very bombastic, okay? Let me give you 2 examples. I'm gonna talk to you about Trump. Trump is a very bombastic president. That guy says what you think about saying, but you're afraid of saying it, and he's gonna say it for you. So he's gonna make you like him because of the way he says it. Trump is not the best dressed. He's not the best looking president, but he thinks he is. He got the biggest hands in the world. He's, the most amazing hands, as he always says it. His confidence just oozes out everywhere he goes. I mean, when you see this man goes to these meetings with these other leaders and the way he just commands the room, okay? The way well, have you ever been on a plane and you sit there right next to somebody and you get into this war where you fight about who's going to take over? That's in a way one of the different ways that you show your presence, your confidence. When Trump walks into a room, think about it, if you were sitting right next to a plane with Trump. Do you think he would be sitting like this, or he would be the one like this? Okay, Trump is like this. He's right there in your face. Okay, not sometimes you can consider it to be rude, but it's the way that he exerts his energy. It's the way that he, makes his awareness be felt. When Trump walks in the room, I'm sorry if you hear the little lawnmower in the background, but we're gonna go ahead and finish off this video. When Trump walks into a room, you can feel that Trump is in that room. When Trump starts speaking, you can tell that Trump is speaking, okay? We can go ahead and wrap this up real quick. Jesus Christ. I'm gonna pause it for a second. Let me see if I can get this guy done here. We're gonna have to wait for him to finish off here. 1 second. Okay, the mowing is done. Let's get back to it. So, as I said, getting back to this, another example that I was gonna give out is, Obama. Obama was, when you're talking about charismatic, I mean, that's the definition of charismatic. Think about how that man walked. When he walked, he had that little swag in his step, okay? And the way he delivered his speeches. I talk so fast, and I just wanted Obama usually would let you marinate on his words. Okay, I remember, listening to him, I was very jealous, I can honestly say, because listening to Obama gives you goosebumps, okay? The guy was very well spoken. The guy was a handsome guy. The guy was, very much so, he used and transmuted sexual energy to get to what he was trying to do. Okay, that's the true definition of sexual transmutation as it pertains to, making it work to, work with you as it pertains to helping you develop charisma when you're trying to get a message across. He was very flirtatious, not just so much in a sexual way, but the way he approached things, the way he communicated. If you guys haven't seen Obama, you guys know what I'm talking about, but let me go ahead and full circle, tie this into loan brokering and give you some specific incidents that you're gonna need assertiveness and charisma in order to get done what you need to get done. We've talked about how the initial call is so important because the objective is to get the client to send over the bank statements and the credit report so he can be evaluated so we can see what they qualify for, okay? That definitely requires some charisma, some assertiveness, to do that. It requires leading. A great leader is assertive. A great leader is charismatic, and there's two ways to lead. Let me make this point, and you can kind of see how it would be great to have both charismatic and assertiveness together, balanced. It's just awesome. It's just that's the Obamas. But Trump, very assertive, kind of lacks the charisma part. He doesn't have it all there, but he's definitely very confident. He's very assertive. He stumbles on his words sometimes, but he speaks the truth. He literally uses fear to lead. You can either lead by influencing the people that need to follow you by influencing, or you can instill fear for them to do what you need to get done. Trump uses a lot of fear, but again, he still gets his job done. You cannot knock that out. Whatever it is, whatever he needs to do in order to get the job done, get it done. The perfect way is to have that balance of the two, to be charismatic and to be assertive, to also use persuasion, but also sprinkle a little bit of fear in a form of maybe consequence. Okay, hopefully you guys can understand what I'm saying. Okay, I'm rambling again. I'm always be rambling. Now, I'm gonna give you an example here. In credit card stacking, it's a very covert type of processing, the type of relationship that you have with the client. You really rely heavily upon the client to let you know a lot of the things. How much they got approved for it. Did they receive their credit line? Sometimes you got to convince the client to contact the lenders to check the status of their applications, to do certain things. And you have to be very charismatic and also maintain this idea as if you're still on top of the application. You know, one of the things that I always tell my client, let's just say an application is stalling for a while and it's just been pending for a long period of time. You know, I usually say something like, let me go ahead and follow up with my Chase contact, you know, but I need a little bit of your help. If you can, please. Sometimes they're a little bit backed up. They're processing a lot of applications right now, but if you contact this number to just check on the status of the application, it can get them to expedite the application process. You know, and I use my charisma, I use my assertiveness to get the client to do what I need them to do. Okay, I got a real estate client right now that we just started and we've been working for some time. This gentleman is doing a refi on 4 properties. Okay, when we started working on his file, he had like a 680. Now he's down to like a 651. And we needed to have him to have, the lender's minimum credit score requirement is a 660 mid score. He's a 651. Okay, 9 points away. So I'm over here, I've been working on this file for like 3 months. I'm like, God damn, man. But I have to deal with what I have to deal with. So I have to contact the client, let them know what the issue is, and let them know what options we have in order to get this done. You know, so I'm calling him, I'm like, hey, you know, we're almost at the finish line. You know, I always start with positivity. I was just talking to one of my processors yesterday. I was saying, you need to stop being negative. Okay, even if a file is denied, you need to stop using words like that. Stop saying denial, stop saying, and even if you have to communicate that language, you need to go ahead and say what you need to say, but go ahead and sprinkle a little bit of positivity in there. You know, let me give you an example. If you apply for an application and it's denied, usually the client's spirit is kind of, you know, goes down a little bit as far as their mojo behind them getting what they're supposed to be getting. But if you can just, you know, there's still multiple lenders that we're going after. You know, I usually tell my processor, I told him, hey, go reach out to the client, tell him that, hey, unfortunately this application has been denied, but we're gonna go ahead and reach out to one of our lending contacts to try to see if we can get this overturned. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and proceed on with this next set of applications. Don't let this one affect what we're trying to do. We're still very confident we can still go ahead and get you approved, okay? Again, the way I'm communicating with my assertiveness and also just directing and persuading the client to do what I need them to do in order for us to reach our goal. Because maybe they had a bad relationship with that specific lender. I don't know what the heck happened, but they got denied. But that should not stop the process. That should not change their attitude towards what we're trying to do. You know, this specific scenario that I just explained to you with this, I had to contact the client. We've been working for like a month and a half. He's expecting for me to call him to get a closing date, but I have this terrible news that I have to present to him. But if I don't, I'll just say this. If you have bad news and you don't have a solution behind that, don't even share the bad news, okay? So it was, hey, we're at a 651, but you need to be at 660, but this is what we can do. We can do a balance transfer with that new business credit card that we just got for you as an option. Another thing that we can do, we can get you a personal loan, you know, and he mentioned to me himself, it was actually his fault. His wife had used one of his cards. It was like a JCPenney card. She went shopping recently or something like that. And then also he had went and fixed one of his rental properties and went to Home Depot and increased the balances of one of his cards. So his score, of course, took a little slight drop, okay? But great conversation that I had with him. That conversation could have went completely south if he was somebody, you know, something else. If you do not use charisma, if you do not use assertiveness, and you said, hey, we can't get the file closed because you had a 651 and you needed to be a 660, you know, why did you increase the balances of your credit and start all this stupid argument with the clients? You want to reduce as much friction as you need to whenever you're working with clients. It is not a 1 + 1 = 2 when it comes to being a business loan broker. It takes a lot of personality. It takes a lot of charisma. It takes a lot of assertiveness. It takes a lot of all of these things that I'm talking about. And these are the 2 skills that, unless you start developing them now, you know, you're not gonna be able to be successful in this business. You're really not, because it's just not the business for you. You know, if you think about any type of sales type of business, you have to have charisma. You know, if you're, you know, very quiet and never want to talk to anybody and just like, let me give you an example, and this is kind of not the best example, but Bill Gates would never be a great car salesman, okay? Who's another good example? Mark Zuckerberg would never be a great any kind of sales, you know, but he used what he had. Mark Zuckerberg was great at what he did, and he put the certain people in place to help him with some of the different things that he was lacking. You know, he still had to develop sales skills. You know, he's the leader of the company, you know, but he's definitely not charismatic, okay? And you know, he was able to win us in other different areas by developing this. You know, Facebook changed the world when you're talking about social media. You know, it wasn't the first social media website. You know, we used to have MySpace, we used to have Xanga, we used to have High Five, all these other things. But the way Mark Zuckerberg's developed Facebook, the platform, the way we interacted on Facebook, with the way he developed, is just completely different. He utilized and transmuted his sexual energy and really understood what people wanted to see and how they wanted to interact when it comes to this social media thing, and how they wanted to share their experiences through social media, how they wanted to stay connected through social media. So again, something completely different, but hopefully you got the point. I wanted to make this video specifically talking, especially addressing some of the different loan brokers that we're recruiting into the training. Yes, you're gonna love the training. The training is amazing, but these two skills are crucial. These two skills is just as important as the training that you received, just as important as the 3 paths of lending, just as important as all the different tools and everything that, yeah, you're wowed about all that other stuff, but unless you develop the charisma, unless you develop the assertiveness that you need, unless you start working on your tone, unless you start working on your presentation. I was working with a gentleman yesterday, one of my new students, and I told him, you know, hope you don't take this the wrong way, but you got to start developing a different voice. He's originally from Africa, and he sounds very African. I'm originally from Africa myself. And I told him that it's either you actually just really dive into your African tonality, or you need to develop a different tone when you're addressing clients. We do this a lot in the Black community. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know, when we are in a professional setting, we talk and act in a different way. And then whenever we are here just hanging out with maybe our Black friends, or maybe just relaxed, just friends in general, it's a whole different tonality. You know, and not just in the Black community, but very much so in the Black community. You know, you see somebody talking to the Black community, they pick up the phone, a completely different tonality. But the way we, and even just in general, the way we present and act when we, let's say, go to certain institutions, like when you go to court, you're on your best behavior, okay? When you go visit your grandparents, you're on your best behavior. When you go to church, you're not cursing, you know? So there's a certain presence that you have to have whenever you're in these environments, if you understand what I'm saying. So there's a certain presence that you have to have, and there's a certain experience that you have to offer your clients when they're going through a loan transaction, when they're going through speaking to you. There's a certain way that you have to approach communicating with them, and it requires for you to be charismatic and for you to be assertive. Anyway, I can go all day about this specific topic. Hopefully you got the point. Again, Brian Marcus Otieno, as I call myself, the godfather of lending. Shout out to Kevin Samuels. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.